Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kufis and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Men for the Win is sponsored by the Grand Group with Edina Realty. Are you looking to purchase a new home in the Twin Cities area? Or perhaps you're trying to sell your current home? Whether you're upsizing or downsizing, the Grand Group with Edina Realty will meet all of your housing needs. Contact the Grand Group by emailing thegran, that's G-R-A-N, group, at edinarealty.com, or call them by phone at 612-817-8751. The Grand Group with Edina Realty, 7-time Minneapolis-St. Paul Magazine Super Agent Award winners.
On this episode, David, Dan, and Hoges discuss the 2023 MLB rules changes. Thanks for listening. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in to Men for the Win. My name is David Kufis. With me, as always, is Dan Thompson and special third chair guest Andrew Hoges Hoganson. A good episode here, folks, talking strictly about the 2023 rules changes. We don't even know who the Twins are anymore, boys.
I just want to talk about the snowstorm, though. How are you guys? Are you guys prepared? Like, do you have cans? Do you have, like, food lined up?
All the water bottles are already in the basement. We're ready to go. I mean, it's looking pretty crazy. We might get up to 2 feet of snow here, which I'm pretty excited about because I'm doing the Berkey next weekend. So we need snow. I don't want to be skiing on ice.
The snow will come up so high, Hoges. You're going to have to switch to snowshoes, I think.
It might happen. But, yeah, it looks like it could be a pretty hairy couple of days here coming up.
But the Twins are down in Florida. That seems a whole lot better.
Well, sort of. But remember, they just finished the repairs on the stadium and whatnot after the hurricane.
I think that's the worst part about following all these Twins beat writers on Twitter is we have this huge storm coming in and all of them are at happy hours with palm trees in the background. I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty nice. Why do I live here again? I don't know.
It's the weirdest thing to me. Like, they keep posting updates like, all right, Sonny Gray is going to pitch to Byron Buxton and whoever. It's like, I don't know. Is it that organized?
No, it's definitely more structured because different hitters want to see different types of pitchers, obviously the hands, but also the splits as far as what types of pitches they're throwing.
I long for the days, though, where they would just go out and hit. Haven't all this, like, metrics kind of, like, taken away from the fun of baseball?
Old man yells
Dan,
at clouds.
we do a podcast. Yes, my goodness. Dan always does this. I long for the days when this sport was completely different.
Well, speaking of.
Yes. Hey, great segue. Wow, look at that, Hoges.
Thank you.
Welcome, by the way. So glad you could join us here. Again, if you didn't listen to the last episode, Hoges is our sort of permanent fill-in host. And in special episodes, we'll have him third chair. It's kind of fun to get a few different perspectives about things, especially some big changes for the upcoming 2023 MLB season.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the ghost runner and extras pitch timer, the fact that pitchers can only throw over twice to first base, or I guess any other base, position player pitching limits, shift limits, bigger bases. This is like the all-star episode right now. I love talking about rules.
Dan is a rules follower, and there's nothing that he... You know how I know that Dan loves rules? We were in a small group for church, and Dan was the first one to comment how much he liked my margins and spacing in the worksheet that I had produced. So that's how I know Dan would love talking about rules.
That's just good formatting, David, right? I mean, everybody likes a well-formatted memo, don't they?
It's the first thing people see and the first thing people judge. You got to make a good impression.
Anyway, boys, with that here, we're going to sort of go sort of minor to major, I guess, as far as changes are concerned, at least in the mind of Dan Thompson. I'll say these bigger bases, man, they keep Dan up at night. But let's start with the rule that's really not a change, but it did cement in for the 2023 season and beyond, the ghost runner and extras. So again, if you're not familiar, if the game goes through 9 innings and it goes into the extras, each team will start with a runner on second base.
I cared a lot more about this when it first came out, when they started doing it during like the COVID years and everything. It was one way to just make the game go faster, and so you didn't have to burn through so many pitchers when they had such a shortened spring training to get ready. And now it's official. I hate it. I'll be honest. I don't like it. Like, I just think it takes away from the strategy of baseball, and it just feels gimmicky. It's not quite on the level of like the NHL shootout, but I don't know. It's not real baseball in those extra innings. And I think what we'll get to later, the pitch timer fixes this problem more so than just the length of games anyway. So I don't really like it, but I'm used to it, so I don't care as much as I used to.
It is. They definitely slow rolled us into it, right? I mean, like, they've made it feel like, this is manageable. Whereas if they would have said this like it was a permanent change a couple years ago, I mean, we would have been all over it. I think having seen it happen now for a few years, I don't terribly mind it. I don't terribly mind the fact that baseball games don't go that long anymore. Lovelli Neal at the Star Tribune suggested, and he was bemoaning the rule too. He said, if they started it at the 12th inning, then he'd be okay with that. At least give a couple innings. I don't know. I think think once you're there, you might as well do it in the 10th.
Yeah, I think these arbitrary distinctions that are drawn, which we're going to talk about a little bit later as well, but I think specifically with this rule, the issue that I have with it is that it requires stat manipulation in order to not negatively impact the pitcher when a team wins it because there was a bunt and then a sac fly. And I think that that's just ridiculous. I'm not sure how many times that actually happened the last couple of seasons, but enough that it made an impression to me to see these pitchers who's like, well, they did what they could.
I think there were a lot of times we wish the Twins would have done that, right? Just bunted and sacrificed, and they never did. But I do agree with the stat manipulation aspect, though they've been doing this with college football for a long, long time with that silly overtime setup, too. So this is not like this is without precedent.
What?
The silly overtime thing where they put the ball at 25 and they give the team... I mean, that's silly. I don't like
For
that.
the record, I think that is the greatest overtime in all college and professional sports because it's the
Dan,
most exciting.
Dan, you are in the minority here, my friend, I think.
But then why not like load the bases like in the 13th inning here, like just to get it over
faster? They're still playing football. Like they're still playing actual football. Like here, like it's just like I think what David said is the biggest thing against it. If you can get a sac fly and a bunt, I mean that's it, or a bunt and a sac fly. Sorry, the other way around. That's it. There's no hit. Like I just don't like that. In college, you still have to score a touchdown.
But no, you don't, because if you get a stop and then you kick a field goal and then you're good.
How is that different than the NFL?
The NFL is worse.
I don't know. I would rather have something. I don't know. I don't necessarily. I'm in that minority that doesn't mind the NFL rule being the way that it was, where it's like, well, if you can get a stop on defense and then you can. Anyway, I can see the issues here. I'm going up. I'm swimming uphill here.
It's just so funny because honestly, folks, Dan and I talk quite a bit off the podcast. Obviously, you would think that this is like the first time we're talking about college overtime rules. Dan Thompson has called me specifically, this being the only topic of discussion that he's interested in. He's like, hey man, I just got an idea for how college football overtime should work.
Can we go back to baseball here? What happened? We've devolved.
You have been.
This is my fault.
You were taking pot shots at college football overtime rules.
I was
for some
really
reason.
using it as an analogy, and now you guys are making it the argument.
I think the best way to sum up the Ghost Runner is kind of how David talked about the new playoff rules where they have an extra playoff team. In theory, I don't like it, but watching all of those wild card games was awesome. And so it's the same way with this. In theory, I don't like it, but if I'm doing something and I see that the Twins are going into extra innings, I turn it on right away because I know that it's going to go quickly. So my actions
especially the Twins, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. My actions kind of speak louder than my actual thoughts on this, I think.
Because it's permanent, are more managers going to change the way they approach this, or is this something just going to be a continuation of what was?
I'd like to say Baldelli's going to actually try to use a little more situational baseball in it, but I don't think he's going to. I mean, he would have but before. So yeah, I don't think it actually changes anything.
No, I think that we will see more though of the bunts and the sac flies. I think that that's just bound to happen. And there's a few of these changes that I think that if you're a manager in baseball and you don't start adapting to these situations, you're going to have a lot of people asking why.
Well, we should go into the pitch timer here.
Yeah, so this one is a big change for baseball. So they have this implemented in the minors, and basically all it does is it adds a clock to baseball. And there's a couple of things we need to note up front about this. Number one, when we say it adds a clock to baseball, it doesn't add a clock in the same way as in football or basketball or hockey, where as soon as there's zeros, or in soccer, whatever number they go up to,
no one knows.
That's about. Nobody knows what that number is. It's magical. Only one guy on the field who has a magic stopwatch knows how many minutes are going to be added at the end of each. What do they do? Halves, thirds? I don't know what they do in soccer. Anyway, but when we say we're adding a pitch clock, basically it's just to speed up the pace of play and that the pitcher needs to get the ball back to the catcher in a reasonable amount of time. So you see these memes going around about how, like the Earl Weaver quote, in baseball, you can't kill the clock. You've got to give the other man his chance. That's why it's the greatest game. That's still a thing. The defense, you can't just as the pitcher hold the ball and wait for the game to end. That's not how it's going to work in baseball. All that's happening here is now that there's a set time limit that the pitcher has to get the ball back over the plate just to keep the game moving.
I don't know. I mean, I watched a couple minor league games last year where this was the case. I don't necessarily mind it at the minor league level. There's still something about it at the major league level that feels like it was maybe going to take care of itself if you had instituted at the minor league level. And then, because we saw Twins pitchers come up who'd pitched in AAA, Cole Sands, people like that, and they worked faster. And I just wonder, I don't know, would that be enough? I guess baseball really wants to shorten games, but we're gonna see 2.5-2-hour games sometimes.
I've come full circle on this one because at first I hated it. Like the Earl Weaver quote, baseball is supposed to be untimed. It doesn't have anything to do with a clock. You just go at the pace of the game. But then actually Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic had a good point. The players brought this upon themselves. Like, this isn't a problem that snuck up on anyone. There were multiple warnings that this could happen. Game times have increased unbelievably. If you look at like times in the 70s and 80s up to what it is now, I mean, you're routinely going 3 hours 20 minutes, 3 hours 30 minutes, and it's just absurd. And there's so much downtime in between pitches. I think these limits are perfectly reasonable to still give the guy enough time to think about what their next pitch has to be. And honestly, I think it's going to be for the best. And I don't really think that if they would have just done it in the minor leagues that it would have helped things out. I think it needed to be at the major league level. Otherwise, guys would just get ingrained in what they do.
Well, and along with that, I think that these new wristbands and the audio communication device between the pitchers and the catchers also helps to speed up the pace of play.
We should point out the time limits, by the way. So pitchers will be required to begin their motion 15 seconds after receiving the ball with the bases empty, or 20 seconds after receiving the ball with runners on base. And if they don't, they will be charged with an automatic ball. Also, batters must be in the box and alert to the pitcher by the 8-second mark on the clock, or else they can be charged with an automatic strike, which makes me think of like Chuck Knobloch, who took 45 seconds between pitches back in the early 90s.
The problem I have with this is I don't mind, again, the speeding up of the pace of play, but this was the same thing that I brought up last season in the podcast when they were talking about this potential pitch clock implementation. I want to see how it's enforced. And truly, are we going to see how many balls and strikes are we going to see called due to this time violation? Like, I just have so much trouble wrapping my head around this actually being the thing.
I think they're going to have to.
Yeah, I think it has to be enforced with an iron fist, because if they don't, it's going to cause so much more angst. Like, and I know that is a horrible place to put the umpires in, but that's just what has to happen. They need to call those balls and strikes because we need to get that out of the way in spring training and the first couple series of the season. I don't want to be watching a World Series game and guys getting called strikes or balls or whatever, or people just blatantly ignoring it. Like, it needs to be ingrained into the system far before then, and then I think it will be successful. There were so many games that I watched on tape delay last year where I would watch on my phone, and you know how you can do like the 15-second skip ahead? In between every pitch, I could tap it twice and I would see everything. So that's 30 seconds. And it was so frustrating. But honestly, it almost made watching the game more enjoyable when I was doing that, because I just saw the action. And I don't even mind like long, drawn out at bats, but just throw the ball faster. Like, just throw the ball.
You're missing out on all that A+ commentary from Dick Kramer.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, you can make the same comparison to football, where between plays, you've got 30 to 40 seconds. There's a play clock, right? And some teams manipulate that differently, and I don't think that detracts. I do think the pace being picked up is not going to be a negative. I think there still will be enough drama in the game to be able to make those big moments matter still.
Yeah, I think so. But again, you love these comparisons with football this episode, Dan. I don't know what that's about. Getting 22 guys set is a little bit different than 2.
I know they have more time in football, and that's fine. But
they don't.
Yeah.
They got 35 seconds. I guess technically they do.
They have a lot more time. I mean, I guess, but yeah, in college, maybe you have less once they set the ball and it's 25 seconds, and it's a little bit different in that way too. But are we going to say now, the times we took our children to games, like how many innings they made it? Like, are we going to have an asterisk now? Like, was this the before the pitch clock and after the pitch clock?
Definitely in those baby books. That's going to be page number 1 for me.
Yeah.
My oldest, she does quite well at the games, actually. I'm pretty surprised how long she'll stick it out. But really, it's really just a determining factor with how much ice cream and kettle corn she gets.
If you get a big bag of kettle corn, you can stay a long time at a baseball game.
It's shocking. I mean, bedtime is terrible, but it's totally worth it if the game's good.
We should talk about the other element of this too, where pitchers can only throw over twice before they have to get the guy basically at first. I mean, we're basically talking about first base, aren't we?
Yes. Well, I mean, I guess, yeah. I don't know how many times you're throwing to second or third just because those are higher risk throws. But I mean, along with that, I mean, because they say it's limited to 2 disengagements from the mound. So that includes pickoff attempts or just step-offs, which I think it's funny because they kind of do a deep dive on this. Some pitchers are actually going to have to change their windups because of the way that their windups work, that they'd call it a sort of, I don't know, it's not really a disengagement, but they'd say that you can't do this weird sort of wiggle and shake windup before tossing over the plate.
Who was the guy, who's the Twins pitcher who would do that with his, was it Hansel Robles who did that for a little while?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, is that what we're talking about? I'm just trying to think of a point of reference here.
So there's the guy, who's the Astros pitcher who does that whole weird, like, Luis Garcia. He does this little, I think the Athletic called it a cha-cha, steps prior to his delivery, and they say he can't do that anymore. So can you imagine if you're a guy who's been doing that for years, and now all of a sudden, no more, my friend, no more, you just got to pitch like a normal person.
Yeah, especially with baseball players, because they're so ingrained in every single step of their swing, their rotation, their windup. I mean, it's all exactly the same. Like, that's what they try to do. So yeah, I think that's going to be a big deal. I don't really get this rule. Like, how many games have you been over where a guy's throwing 3 times over in a row anyways. And frankly, it's kind of funny because if it's the road team that's doing it, then they just get booed like crazy. And I've kind of always enjoyed that. Maybe this is a way to not have pitchers manipulate the pitch clock by just stepping off and everything. But I don't know. This one I'm kind of indifferent to. I never thought it was that big of a problem. And I guess maybe you get a little drama if you know the guy threw over twice and then you're like, oh, he's going to go. But outside of that, I don't see a huge impact from this.
Hoges, I think you hit it on 2 different fronts here. First off, I think you're right that because of the pitch clock, they had to have a way to limit the amount of times that a pitcher could manipulate that clock with step-offs and throw-overs. But secondly, yeah, they want to see more stolen bases. And I think that the limiting of throw-overs will almost certainly change the way that a manager manages a game when you have a guy with some speed on first base. And to think that he won't is absolutely insane. If you look at the minor league numbers, stolen bases, the attempts didn't rise all that much, but the success rate rose 10%. Can you imagine 10% more? And I know Dan's going to say that's like 99% because of the bigger bases, but I'm pretty sure it has
That's exactly what I was waiting for. You didn't give me a moment to jump in.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I just think the bigger bases is a big deal. How many times have we zoomed in on a replay to see like, oh, enhance, right? Like those like late 90s movies. Like, did his finger touch the bag before the baseball glove got him? Like, we're not going to have those moments in nearly the same way. They're going to be safe much more often. It all comes back to the bigger bases.
He had to get it in there sooner. It's on the list at the end. Gonna give him his moment, but no, he's got to jump in and mention it sooner.
It relates to everything. It's all related to that. Ghost runners, everything, right? It's all comes back to the bigger bases.
Go ahead.
Do we really think the Twins are gonna steal more bases this year, or even attempt more? I mean, it felt like maybe what was even the number? I thought it was like 20 something stolen bases last year. I mean, it was absurdly low. Maybe it's because that's where we live in. We just got run on all the time and never actually tried to steal a base, that I just don't care about stolen bases anymore.
Rocco didn't realize it was a rule. That's why there were so many stolen bases on the Twins, because he didn't understand what the other teams were doing because he's never tried it himself.
The question, though, I think there's a point there to be made where isn't everybody going to just steal a few more bases, in which case are the Twins still left behind by the difference? If the Twins steal 10 more bases but the other guys steal 50, well, it didn't help. If anything, I think you're right. I think it points to a strategic element of this that Rocco just doesn't like to send guys.
I mean, I think we can all agree that we'd like to see more stolen bases. I mean, it's a great play in baseball. So if this leads to that, I'm all for it. And I think about, like, if I were playing, I would have had a blast with this rule because I'm a small little guy. So I just stole bases. That's all I did. And if I knew that I only could get a pitcher to throw over there 3 times, I would take the biggest lead you've ever seen every single time off there.
I was talking to a buddy from work about this, and I was saying, well, you're probably going to see way more steal attempts. And he said, yes, but I bet you're also going to see quite a few more pickoffs, because what's going to happen here is if a pitcher throws over a 3rd time and he doesn't record an out, it's going to be recorded as a balk and the runner gets to take his base. So what you're going to have happen here is runners taking real large leads off those bases, trying to encourage that pitcher to throw over. But the thing is, how many guys are going to do that and end up getting caught being too cute about it?
I think it'll happen, but I also think it'll kind of figure itself out. There's a lot of baseball games in a season. If you think about the whole league, I think by the end of April and May, we're going to have a pretty good idea of how this rule has really kind of played out.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, just in this conversation, I feel like I've argued that it's going to matter and it's not going to matter. Like, I don't really know. I guess we'll see.
Here's the thing. This is the only rule, I'd say, on this list that I could see if things got crazy out of hand, the MLB making a change at the All-Star break.
They make changes all the time willy-nilly. Like that's just like they did last year. Like the Ohtani rule, like 2 weeks into the season, they're like, oh, we forgot about this. He can do whatever he wants. So that's fine. Go for it.
Well, speaking of that, so we should move into the player position limits thing, because that was one that they changed mid-year last year.
Yeah, so now there's these new rules for position players pitching, and how it works now is that in order for a team to let a position player pitch, they have to have a 10-run advantage in the 9th inning before that non-pitcher player can go to the mound. Now, teams that are trailing by 8 or more will be allowed to use position players at any point during the game. But so in this way here, it's basically you have to have an astronomical lead in order for you to put a position player on the mound, but only 8 runs back to put a position player on the mound if you're losing.
This is a dumb rule. This is
stupid.
You're basically saying a manager can't manage how he wants to manage. And I just think, again, this is an issue that is trying to over-legislate something that baseball just has other mechanisms to take care of.
I couldn't agree more. It's just, why? Why are we doing this? Like, let them put them in if they want to. When I played, I loved it when they put in someone who wasn't a pitcher, because you just go up there and tee off. And frankly, it's kind of fun to watch too. So if a team is down 4 runs and they want to just get beat, go for it. Put in whoever you want. I don't care. Like, this one makes no sense to me. And the part that's weird to me is I feel like I'm in the minority on that, just based on the Twitterverse that I've been looking at. Like, people love this, and I don't understand that.
I think it's called the Twitterverse. Oh,
I like
that's how they
Twitterverse
say
better.
it. Koofus, though, you're shaking your head over there like you feel differently.
I do a little bit, and I've sort of come around on this for a couple of reasons. So here's my question. Why are rosters constructed in such a way that you can only have 13 pitchers?
Well, because otherwise they would have more pitchers.
Very good, Dan. Okay, so here's my question. Originally, when I thought about this, I was thinking that, you know what, yeah, you should, when it comes to shift bands, whatever, when it comes to position players pitching, you should let the manager make whatever decision he wants. However, if you're going to do this, I say we get rid of any roster restrictions for the type of players you need to carry on your roster. But to make this arbitrary split in roster, if you're going to allow position players to pitch, there should not be a roster construction limit then.
I actually like that. I think that makes perfect sense, especially with if guys like Ohtani end up becoming the new normal. I doubt it, but like that, I just fine. Then don't have that in there anymore. They can put. I think they should have got rid of that a long time ago. Anyways, like if they want to carry 19 pitchers and just completely inhibit what your ability to have your bench, to go for it.
I mean, again, I'm making metaphors all over the place, but like with hockey, if you want to start 7D instead of 6, they don't care. Like, they don't stop you from doing that. Like, it seems so silly.
The only thing with that is you can't just have like a rotating roster of pitchers in between like AAA and the major leagues. Like,
but there's other mechanisms to take care of that too, right? With
true,
the limitations on moves and things like that. So, yeah, I just think, or if a team really wants to try to figure that out, I mean, the Dodgers again did that with the injured list. That's why we have the injured list we have now, because the Dodgers were manipulating that. So somebody will find a way to manipulate it, and I guess they'll legislate to try to find a way around it.
Yeah, but that's what I don't like about it. I don't like that you have to keep stacking these rules upon rules, and that's why I'm saying if you're going to make a hard and fast rule, say, hey, no position players can pitch in a game ever. However, you can have as many pitchers on your roster as you want. But otherwise, if there's going to be that specificity, I think the roster construction should reflect that in the rules of the game on the field.
And then what's to say, why can't you have pitchers, coming in and pinch running more? Like, that happens occasionally too. Like, smart managers are going to do that for, Miguel Sano at second base or something. Let's bring in Josh Winder or somebody like that.
The larger point here, and maybe it kind of applies to the rest of these rules as well, is it's a bit reactionary. Like, it's something that hasn't really been a problem per se, other than maybe the last few years. Let's see what happens. Let it work itself out a little bit more.
Well, boys, I think it's time we move on to the biggest change for the 2023 season.
The bigger bases? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, yes, that's it, Dan. The bigger bases.
This one relates to the bigger bases too. So you go ahead with this and I'll fill it in.
Okay, no, let's just talk about this, because Dan's not going to leave it alone until we do. We can get to the shift in a moment, but let's talk about the bigger bases. They go from 15 inches to 18 inches, and some of the memes have been pretty hilarious. Like, guys have made the bases just ridiculous. And I don't know if you've seen this one where it's like Manfred is still the commissioner, and it's year 2035, and like the bases, you show the picture of the rain delay tarps over where the bases are. They're like, these are the bases. There's like 3 feet between them.
So they give a lot of reasons. They talk about safety of the players, which I don't totally understand. Like, are they suggesting that like players are stepping on bases wrong and this is going to change that? Because they're always trying to clip corners anyway, aren't they?
No, I think it's more about when a guy slides, there's more space for him to maneuver around the defender's foot.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's ultimately what they're going for safety. But I'm kind of becoming a convert on this one too. I think it actually will lead to more stolen bases also. Not only because there's like it's shorter to get to second base than it is right now. I don't know how much it actually is. I mean, I know it's just inches, but you have a bigger base to aim for too. So you get more directional slides on some of these, and I think that will actually be rather noticeable. I think that leads for more exciting baseball too.
I do wonder how many times guys are going to be called out for being out of the baseline now because of the bigger bases. Like, how does that impact the running lane for runners? Like, do they really have that much more leeway to go out, east-west?
That rule has always bothered me because it's so arbitrary. Like, that they've gone out of the lane. They have a hard enough time on first base and third base, or especially first base, when it literally is a line. Like, I don't understand. And I guess we've seen some situations where guys have, like, skipped a base, maybe as they're rounding second or rounding third, and they don't actually touch it. But I do think the steals is where this really matters. I hadn't thought, though, about the slide angles and things like that.
Yeah, I think double plays will be impacted quite a bit. I mean, they're already trying to cut down on guys just cutting people down, and now they have a whole lane to just stay completely away from each other, so you can still slide hard without impacting the throw over to first.
Do you remember the time, too, when, like, players didn't actually have to be, standing on second base to make the double play, and then they changed that rule? I mean, again, another one of those strange things in baseball.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I wish rules like this were around when I played, because my shins look like someone just beat the crap out of them. When we switched to metal spikes and I was a second baseman and a shortstop, my shins got just brutalized. So I don't hate that.
Hoges is at the soccer store buying some shin guards.
I thought about it. I really did. So I used to always roll my pants up so that just my socks were there. And I stopped doing that because I wanted the extra layer of protection between the spikes that were always coming at me. Because even when we were 13 years old, we were taught to raise our cleats and clip the second baseman. I mean, it's crazy, but that's what we did.
You weren't playing true sport then, I take it home.
That was not in true sports.
That's a deep cut for those
that is a real deep cut.
That
there might be some Minnesota people that know that one, though.
I think it's time to move on.
That's it, Dan. You've been building this up for weeks about bigger bases, and you don't have some soapbox to jump up upon?
First of all, the base is large enough to operate as a soapbox. I think you're gonna see. Just wait until this happens, and you guys are going to see how great of a rule change this is. Byron Buxton's going to suddenly be a 50-50 guy. It's going to be fantastic.
Do you think he will steal more bases now? I've been wondering that so much this offseason because he's supposed to be healthy. They're talking about DHing him more, or the Twins going to treat him kind of with kid gloves this upcoming year, or are they just going to let him loose?
I think that he's spent so much time around Carlos Correa, he's never going to steal another base again.
He put a metal plate in his ankle just for camaraderie's sake.
Did you go back and look at that replay, though, that like everyone was talking about during the physicals? I don't think it was so much like, it was like just a terrible slide. Like Correa had no idea what he was doing trying to go into second base.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, if he would have had a bigger base to go to, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. It's the Carlos Correa rule.
But like, they have some more speed on the bases. We'll see. But the problem is that it's the same coaches. Well, Michael Taylor's faster, right?
Than Buxton?
Well, no, I mean faster than like
he's
Gilberto,
another player though.
He's
another player on the team. I mean, if you had Michael Taylor and Luis Arise in a foot race, I'm pretty sure Taylor comes away with that one.
Arise was deceptively fast on the base paths, though. No, he was.
Arise was quick. He was never fast.
Okay, there we go. That's better.
How about Christian Vasquez? Like, is he good? Because remember, we were making fun of Gary Sanchez last year quite a bit for his lack of fleetness.
Well, I think just because when they would pinch run, who did they pinch run? Who was that?
Caleb Hamilton. It was Billy, or no, it wasn't Billy. It was
Caleb Hamilton.
They'd pinch run Caleb Hamilton. It's like these two guys. How much time could possibly you be saving here?
Again, if the bases were bigger, it might have mattered a little bit more. All right, guys. I think I'm ready to move on now to the shift limits because I do think that this is a big deal.
It is, and I just wonder. I don't even know how to put my feelings into words, honestly, because so many of these rule changes.
That's great because we have a podcast, David. So I really hope you can put your feelings into words.
I just think that so many of these rules changes take managerial decisions away from the managers. And I think the way that players are aligned, I think that a lot of casual baseball fans specifically don't fully understand the thought and the time and the resources that are spent understanding how fielders need to be aligned based upon the pitcher, how the pitcher is going to pitch that particular batter, and where that batter tends to hit the ball. And so you're taking a lot of that away because you're really limiting the capacity of the manager and sort of the rest of the staff to organize the fielders in such a way that they see fit.
This is the worst one right here. And you're absolutely right. It takes away from the strategy of baseball massively. It's like when they tried to ban zone defense in the NBA. Like you have to have offenses react to what the defense is doing. That's one of the beauty of all sports. We've been talking about all sports all night tonight. I mean, you got football where you're changing how many men you have in the box based on if you're playing a running team. I mean, make hitters adapt to what the outfield is giving you. This is the only only rule that is strictly like the in-game play that completely changes strategy. And guys coming up that were learning to be pull hitters or push hitters because of the shifts that people were doing, they have to change their whole way of thinking. I mean, I think this one drastically impacts the way that the game is played, and I think it takes away a lot from just the everyday strategy of how you're trying to get guys out.
We should say a couple things about what this means. So you have to have 2 infielders on either side of the enlarged second base, and they have to be apparently fully like outside of it, like there's no overlap. It's not like the middle of the base. They also have to be on the dirt, and they can't like, you know, start in one spot and then run quick as the pitcher like changes into his windup, which would be funny to watch, by the way.
Yeah, and like the not being able to stand in the outfield grass too, like that's such a simple thing to be able to do. Like if you see a guy that's slower that's at the plate, you can back up. I mean, that's just reactionary. That's how the game is played. That's how it's taught, and you get an advantage if you're faster with guys having to come in. I don't get it. It's almost like taking away the athleticism out of the game to a certain extent with that, where everything has to be so even. This one grinds me up so much where I don't even know what to say.
Well, they sort of explain that actually they're hoping that this shows more athleticism in the game because players are going to have to cover more ground and make more exciting plays. I don't know how much I buy that, but that's sort of one of the rationales. One other piece of this that changes things is that managers aren't allowed then to also switch the positions that their players are playing, so that we couldn't put Correa in Polanco's spot because we feel that Correa has better range than Polanco. That's not allowed. And again, it's like, oh my goodness, man, what are we doing here?
If you're trying to speed up the game, the pitch clock makes sense. If you're trying to make the game more exciting and add singles, which is a weird thing to say is going to make baseball more exciting, like this is going to work itself out. Baseball players at younger levels were probably learning how to do these things better. Teach guys how to bunt. You know, like do other things here. It seems so short-sighted, especially when you're making other changes to the game. If the game is shorter, people are not going to mind these shift rules. And what I mean is that they won't mind allowing people to shift wherever the heck they want.
That is absolutely the biggest point of this. This would work itself out by learning how to bunt. There are ways to beat the shift that major league hitters can accomplish. They just choose not to. Like that's the other thing that bugs me too. They're still swinging for the fences because they think that is what is more advantageous to them. I just don't see this having the desired effect that it's going to have. And I think when a guy comes up who can beat the shift now, it's super exciting. Like a guy like Arise who is able to just hit to all levels of the field, and he was very successful about that. Or when a guy is clearly trying to just shove it down the left field line when they've got the shift on him, I don't know. I like that. I don't get it.
One other element of this as well is that teams can now review if they feel that a team has broken the shift rules. But then, so in that instance, the team can be credited. There's a couple of things here. So if there is a violation and the umpire decides that, hey, no, there was a pitch violation here, the team can either accept or decline. Can you imagine? I mean, this is just ridiculous.
And you talk about slowing down a game, you're going to add one more thing the teams can do, and that's the declining is silly.
It's just what baseball needs is more lengthy reviews to just see where a fielder is standing before the pitch.
So I should say, too, what will happen there if a team decides to accept the shift ban penalty, it'll count as a ball in the count with the current batter, or they can accept the result of the play, which, again, I just hate that. It feels ucky. Like, I just don't like the way it makes me feel that a team has to decide whether to accept or decline a penalty in baseball. What are we doing?
It just seems fake and not natural to the sport. Like I don't get it. I've said that 100 times. I don't get it.
Like we know that as a child. Like there's just some things that just feel, and this with baseball again. Like yeah, when the right-handed batter is up, you move. You don't stand in the same spot. There's something almost that's automatic about that feels unnatural to take away.
So the other thing we should talk about too, the ways that teams could still try and circumvent these rule changes, you can still shift outfielders. So you could potentially take an outfielder, the left fielder for instance, and put them on the right side of second base. And then sort of put them in the same spot that you had fielders last season from the left side of the infield. However, I mean, that's a big risk here because if a guy does get a shot to left field, even if he's of moderate speed, it should be an inside the park home run.
I don't know. I'd say, well, the cynic in me says, well, they'll just ban that too, right? Like they'll find a way to take that away. But I love it. I love
that. That's a big thing that they talked about because they talked about the ways that the rule can be circumvented and those that they can't. And this is allowable.
I know, but I'm saying they will change that down the road. Like they'll be like, oh, well, we'll get them next year on that. Like it's like all these other rules have been creeping out.
Yeah, but like the thing with that though, if you beat that shift, and I'm putting quotes up now air quotes up as I say that. That's like David said, it's an inside the park home run. Instead of where you beat the old shift, it's probably a single. So that does add a little bit. I guess I don't see teams doing that. It seems way too risky, but I guess we'll see.
Very,
I don't know.
very high risk.
But we saw a lot of teams leave a lot of left field open against left-handed batters, right? I mean, like, there's other ways to do it, even if it's subtle. Like, you move your right fielder up, you move your center fielder over into right a little bit, you move the left fielder to the left center. Like, that's not that different, I suppose, that you could probably make that happen if your right fielder just plays really shallow.
Do you think maybe that's why the Twins signed Michael A. Taylor, because he is such a speedy center fielder that they thought, hey, we might be doing this now. If Buxton goes down, we want a guy that has speed because that's that much more valuable. I mean, maybe they thought about that.
Or heck, you put Michael Taylor in left field in late game situations, right, to cover more ground. I don't know. I think speed is always going to be helpful, especially now with your outfielders. You really need to have fast outfielders to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, this one will be interesting to see how it plays out. That's for sure.
I mean, I know we've mentioned Michael A. Taylor a couple of times now, but just how great does it feel to know that we're not just going to throw some guy into center field if Buxton inevitably goes down with injury?
Are you lumping Jake Cave in with some guy there, David? Gilberto Celestino is some guy. Nick Gordon is some guy. Royce Lewis is some guy, David?
Yeah, Hoges came after me after the last episode because he said that I really changed my tune on Nick Gordon. I thought I defended myself quite well, saying that, yes, I was pretty low on Nick Gordon last season. But I remember last season there was a time when I told Dan he's been the engineer of that train, right? He is the conductor. He's on those tracks for the Nick Gordon train. And I told him I was on board. So, Hoges, this isn't a recent shift. And after Correa's press conference where he said that Nick Gordon is a part of the core of this team, I don't know. That might be the next jersey I order.
Whatever Correa says goes. But I was literally listening to the last episode that we all did at the end of the season, and you trashed Nick Gordon the whole time, ripped on Dan for calling him like a possible MVP, and then I switched to the new podcast, and here you are singing his praises. So in my mind, it was about 5 minutes from when you changed your opinion from when you said it the first time.
I was still pessimistic then, Hoges, though. At the end of last season, I was still in rough shape. Now I have a new son. My spirits are lifted. I have no sleep, Hoges, but lots of optimism.
I will say,
song in your heart yet?
Yeah, oh, there you go. Yep. That's going to take another child, I think, Hoges, before that comes along.
Well, boys, we have covered virtually every rule change for the upcoming 2023 season. I don't know that there's anything left to say. I guess one last note from me. I am excited about these rule changes in a very minimal way to see how many different times a manager is going to get tossed for arguing something that's just like, no, this is a rule now.
That's true. I mean, again, who knows what baseball is going to change mid-season here? They're not done.
They absolutely aren't. We're going to see something else without a shadow of a doubt.
Well, Hoges, thanks for joining us. It's always nice to have your voice on here. It's nice to have three voices, and we didn't even get to talk about Joe Mauer, so we'll have to do that next time.
Yeah, it was fun to be back. I'm excited for baseball season. It's always fun when the Super Bowl ends, getting ready for spring training, and now with the recent signings, the Twins are looking good. I'm optimistic about this year.
All right, well, I think I'm going to go ahead and send us out. Well, folks, if you like what you hear, please tell a friend. You can follow us on Twitter at Min for the Win. You can find our Min for the Win Facebook page. Make sure you've subscribed to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube so that you're notified when new episodes are available. And if you could leave us a rating or a like, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show further, you can find us on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and as always, go Twins. That'll wrap up another episode of Min for the Win, a podcast hosted by David Kuvas and Dan Thompson, two avid fans who appreciate well-played baseball, especially when it's done by the Twins. Thanks so much for listening, and as always, go Twins.